Well, good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to the Flagler County Board of County Commissioners Workshop. It's Monday, April 3rd, 2023. It's 1 o'clock, and we're meeting in the county chambers. The first thing we always do, I'd like you to rise and help me salute our flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Beat Army. And as we always do, we're going to have a moment of silence. And during that moment, I'd like you all to think about the great life we have here in Flagler County, how nice it is to be in Florida, and how great our first responders are, our sheriff, our medical people, the armed forces that take care of us overseas, and our fire department. If you would all just kind of think about those things over the next moment or so. Thank you. Thank you. Well, I'm glad to see we have a crowd today. Commissioners, I'd like to make a change to the agenda if you all agree. I think that after each discussion period, we should have a public comment session rather than just a public comment session at the end. So with your agreement, we will make that change.
So moved. I agree.
Been moved and seconded to adjust the agenda to put in a public comment after each discussion period. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed say nay. Motion carries. Okay, first up, unsafe structure determination discussion. I don't think I have to point out, we've made the decision to destroy that building. That's done. That's going to go away. But what we're going to talk about today is perhaps how we reached that determination to destroy that building, and is it possible to do it better, do a better procedure? And then I think we ought to let the discussion maybe move into, is there a solution for out there? So, Ms. Petito, do you want to start that?
Well, I guess I'll start. As you said, this topic came up recently with the discussion of the damages out at Bull Creek Fish Camp. And when this topic was brought up at a regular meeting, there was a discussion as to what steps does the county take following a storm in making a determination of an unsafe structure. What does that look like? And I think it goes hand in hand with some of the recent changes that we were proposing with the International Building Maintenance Code, and particularly in the area of determining an unsafe structure. But I did want to welcome our building official, Bo Snowden, and he can talk through the process and see if there's any questions.
All right, thank you. Mr. Snowden.
Hey there. Bo Snowden, building official of Flagler. So as you know, we do damage assessment and after storms, hurricane and everything, and we have to make determinations. I was asked to go out to Bull Creek Fish Camp after the flooding subsided there. We walked through it, and you know, the building has issues even before the flood. I think everyone knows that. You know, there was a structural column that was cut out of there. There was something patched back together. Not only did it have the water in there, it had the sewer back up, filled up with, you know, the sewer. And with that said, we wanted to get a second opinion. We got a engineer, and he brought his contractor, came out there, kind of came up with the same decisions that we came up with. In that time, kind of looked for plans. The building's pretty old. We don't have a lot of records of how it was built and the way it is, all the additions, and it's a tough decision. I mean, it's not an easy one. That's what my job is. You know, I don't want to see it go away, but I also don't want to say and put my name on it, and then we put it back together and something gets hurt or something falls apart, and you know, but that is the process, you know.
Well, we also, don't we have a formula that we look at so that you try to figure out whether it takes 50% or more damage or whatever?
The formula only comes in when you're below base flood. Mm-hmm. So if, you know, the building's not below base flood, we would go in there. If I determine something is unsafe, then that owner has every right in the world to get an engineer involved, and the engineer's going to come and tell us what has to happen to this building to make it to where it's not unsafe. Mm-hmm. So in this instance, we are below base flood, so it adds another layer that we have to go by, which would be the value, and you can only spend 50% of what the building value is, not the property value, but just the building value.
Do you think that that procedure is fair? Does it need to be changed, or should we?
Well, it's the same procedure that everyone uses. I mean, if the county wants to save that building or wanted to save that building, we could always go get our own estimate of what the building's worth, set that thing to a different, and then go spend that kind of money. I mean, it's there, it's available. But again, this building is not just a little bit below base flood, it's way below base flood. It's 4 feet below base flood.
Mr. Chairman, just along that same line.
Sullivan.
Since I've been here on the commission, one of the things we found is that over the years, I don't think we've had a great capital maintenance and improvement program. So we're now in a situation with this building, since this wasn't, say 5 years ago, somebody could have said, well, this is, this thing isn't meeting standards, or it's too vulnerable to floods and all that. Maybe something could have been done at less cost back then. So I think that's one of the things we should be looking at for the future to make sure. And we have improved our, what I would call our capital improvement program, capital maintenance program from what it was. But I think this is one of the leftovers from years of basically neglect and floods that we hadn't had in the past. So it's a difficult situation, and I see at this point, well, how can we learn from this to make sure it doesn't happen again?
Yeah,
If we've already decided to tear the building down, apparently.
right.
Right, so.
I don't know that it's neglect. I mean, it's just, they started with an inferior product years ago and built upon it to the point now where only the flood is really released, the underlying issues is the way I see it. You could continue to maintain and improve an inferior building, but those monies are going to get wasted because it's going to flood again. It has in the past, and all indications are it's not, situations are getting worse. But I mean, obviously we can improve processes, especially in maintenance, but this one is kind of unique as I see it.
Yeah, I mean, it's so many additions. There's so much stuff that's happened at different times out there. It's like impossible to follow, and there's definitely some serious rot on the outside. Now, I'm not saying that it all happened from this flood at all, but I don't know what happened in previous floods. If they opened up the walls, aired it out, there's a serious mold issue there. I mean, it's black mold all over the place. And I think it was there before the storm also, to be honest.
Well, again, that's my point. If we had been looking at this, say, starting 10 years ago, we might not have agreed to lease the building and people live there and keep. I like going out there to have lunch. Maybe once every couple of months I go out there. It was it's a nice location. It's a gorgeous location, but I mean, here we are. This is the result of what I would call, if not proper maintenance, not understanding what the problem was. We were too late on that.
Mr. Pennington?
Well, to Commissioner Sullivan's point, I think this is particularly a vulnerable property. We knew it flood, over and over, and I think we should have been solutioning to protect a county asset. It is the taxpayer's asset over the years, and I don't know what the right solution was, whether it been walls or anything for the flooding out there, but it's led us to where we are today. And I've spoken with the residents that have reached out there. They recognize the building is going to come down, and their commitment, they want the commitment from the county to put something back, and we don't want to put something back there that it could be subject to the flood, that's going to withstand this flooding in the future. But my issue and how it came to me, and I guess I could ask you, maybe you would know, do we have any other properties that sit in a floodplain like this that's county? I don't know if Bings is, or...
I'm being told there are. I don't know personally.
Yeah, see, that would be something we need to kind of talk about. How do we maintain those so we don't run into the same issue in the future of having to pull down another building because of flooding? And I don't know if Bings is one of those or whatever, but I think maybe we need to, off topic, maybe staff looks at, how do we maintain those buildings to protect them from ending up like this? Because maybe this could have been somewhat avoided. If we to figure out a solutioning for the flooding out there. But I think what we're here today is talk about the value. What valuation do we want to use for county buildings? we use as a county the property assessor's value, and the inspector used the county assessor's value from the website, which is a low value. And not that they would have known, the staff would not have known, but it was the incorrect value that the assessor had. He actually had his own valuation of it that was not published. But outside of that, would we want to use an assessor's value, or would we want to, on county buildings, because there are more buildings, get a appraisal of the building to use going forward to determine valuation of a property?
That makes sense to me, because the tax assessors, as all the people who own houses know, it's not the right number. When his assessment of the value of your house or your property, it's not market value. It's not the market value of that. So I don't know.
Well, that's what I think is it's the right thing to do, and you guys could maybe have a good argument why it wouldn't be, but it's the right thing to do to get the highest and best value on the property for the taxpayer before we make a determination to tear it down versus remodeling or fixing the issue. Well, because it ultimately costs more to build something else back, no matter what.
Yeah, I think that's worth the discussion, but in this case, it's moot. That building just.
Right, the building's
building
totally
has-
moot, yeah.
totally has-
We understand that. We just want to make sure
it's gotta
that
come
for
down.
the purpose of county buildings,
Right.
what valuation do we want staff to use in the future when making a determination for repair or demolish? Do we want to go down the path of an appraised value from an appraiser, or do we want to use the assessor's value, which we know is going to be lower, possibly,
I have a
or the
question on
higher of the
that.
two?
And Donnie, I may need your expertise.
Donnie, do you want?
But the other buildings that we own are insured, I would assume, that aren't, the ones that are above base flood, we would have insurance on in case they got damaged. This one wasn't insured because it was below base value and we couldn't get insurance. But the others would have insurance, correct? So those would have the insurance. In order to get insurance, would we need a valuation on those? And how would that happen?
I'm not sure what the statute says, but I mean, traditionally, if you're a business, you insure for replacement cost. And replacement cost is a moving target because it changes based on, each year what it costs to rebuild the structure. So,
Right, but it has to be established to give a rate.
yeah, and then a licensed appraiser, if they did a real estate appraisal, they would provide an insurance value, replacement cost. They could also calculate a replacement cost based on market value. It just depends on what you're wanting to accomplish.
So would that accomplish what we need, is just if we've got insurance on our other buildings that meet building code, then there would be a valuation included in that insurance policy that we could rely on?
It's probably not. It can change drastically.
It would be a minimum then. It's not going to go down.
You're talking about for the purposes of language in an ordinance?
Well, for purposes of establishing whether it is going to be raised or red tagged or not.
Well, no, but we're asking for something to put in an ordinance, is what we're looking for here, a method.
Ultimately.
A methodology to
Right.
solve this, yeah. So, yes, you are correct.
I mean, any building that would want to be saved, like if the county made the decision to say, hey, this building wants to be saved and we're in that area, we could always go get a private appraisal, and then that would make us whole with FEMA as long as we don't go over the 50%. This building here, there's just,
Well, this
there
one's-
wasn't a
this-
fix for this building.
Right.
This building's not on the table for
Okay.
discussion. I mean, it's
But I mean,
gone.
if the question came in the building for the county and we're getting near that 50% value and we thought that we needed a second appraisal, we always have the ability to go get that and get it
Then
listed out.
that triggers the other part of this discussion, which is we don't currently, we allow for our county administrator to make the decision. And so this building and the demolition of it was red tagged and it didn't come before the board. So that comes back to, he'd have to have that discussion come back to the board,
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I hate to bring this up, but there is an historical thing that happened in this county, generally in the same line, and that was Captain's Barbecue, which is owned by the county. The building is owned by the county, and it's leased by the people who continue to run it. Initially, what happened there was the guy who was running the restaurant there wanted to build a bigger restaurant. And he got the county, the current county administrator at the time, using, I don't know if it was you or whoever it was at the time, to say, we cannot fix the building for 50% of its value. I challenged that later, and we brought in additional review of the building, and we found out it could be fixed for 50% or less of its value, and it's still there today. There's a court case involved, which I don't want to get into that. But there is some variations in there. It doesn't seem to me like it's hard and fast the way we have it set up right now, because in this case, we were told by the county administrator at the time that the building could not be saved, and there was a big thing about it and all that. And finally, we challenged it, at which time we had made some other decisions that hurt that, but it turned out that it could be brought up to code for less than 50% of its cost. That building also had some flooding involved with it. But I think the point of all this is that this isn't the first time that something like this has happened. Not the first time. And we should learn from history. And it'd be nice if we didn't have that court case that's still going on, that's costing us legal fees and everything else. So I think the point we're trying to make here is it may well be worthwhile to take a look at this thing from the position of somehow or another, whatever the county did initially didn't prove out to be factual in the end.
You know, I think we haven't beat it to death yet, but it's getting close. I think that our direction to you should be, let's look at how would we structure this so that we get an outside appraisal maybe on any building where we're trying to make this kind of decision, rather than rely on the tax assessor the property appraiser, because his is going to be unrealistically low, I think, just because we know we all own property here. So I think that our tasking to you is, let's see what that looks like. If we change our ordinance to reflect that kind of an appraisal rather than the other, or maybe look at both or whatever. But I think that, I think Dave brings up a good point. We don't want to get caught again in that kind of, because that was embarrassing. So I think we ought to do it the first time correctly. So I don't know, fellow commissioners, is that enough guidance for the staff? Or?
Well, by statute, what is the minimum requirement for setting the appraised value?
We have flexibility. There's different ways it can be measured. Replacement costs is one, the most common. There's one that looks at I forget the phrase, but it looks at the functionality of the property and how much it's worth from that perspective. But it's really supposed to be the cost of the building itself, not the value of the land, if it's like oceanfront as opposed to in the middle of nowhere. But a couple of things I did want to point out is no matter how much we specify in our ordinance how it's to be measured, there's always going to be a certain amount of gamesmanship because of the emotions involved and what people's goals are. It's hard to avoid it completely. And the one other thing I wanted to stress is that the county administrator does not condemn buildings. It was stated that it's the building official under our code and under the building code. He is the master of that domain, so to speak.
Right.
Go ahead.
I was going to say, so am I wrong then to ask for let's look at that? Is how do we determine that value? I think that's what we're discussing here. How do we determine it? And I think you bring up a good point. The number should be the replacement value of the building, I think is the right number. But how do we get to that number? Who tells us what that number is?
Well, that goes back to my question about insurance. It may be stated in our policies, which may have to be updated, but
This
I
building
mean,
didn't
that's
have
the
insurance.
market doing its
Right now,
Mixed
it
thing.
says you can do either or. You can either rely on the property appraiser's value, or you can go out and do your own appraisal. We came, at least I mentioned it before the board, to see if there was any determination to move forward with doing a cost appraisal, and there was no consensus by the board to do that, because at the time, we were using the value of the property appraiser. But to your point about insurance, recently, we went out through the budget process, we're going through looking at our insurance policies, and on this particular building, it was audited by our insurance carrier, and they came out, they have a value of $335,000. So even if you were to use that number and go to half, it would be half of 335,000, which probably is not too far off of the property appraiser's value that we used in determining this.
So we could use insurance as the basis instead of having to rely on a low number in the property appraiser's site.
I just think we need to give enough guidance so that we fix this. I don't think we should be, you as the administrator and we as the county commissioners, be in a position where we don't know. What number should we use? I think we should decide which number we're going to use and then put that in the ordinance, rather than.
Are you asking for a carve-out specifically for county-owned properties?
For which property?
A carve-out specifically for county-owned properties? In other
Yes.
words, it's not the same
No.
language that would be applied to every other
No,
property?
just for county-owned building.
Mr. Chairman, if I could interject now, Adam
Yes,
Engel, Growth
Adam.
Management Director, and one of 3 certified floodplain managers we have in our department. What you're talking about is FEMA and building code. And so there are methods that are listed in both. And so if you're going to do something different for county buildings, do it by policy. Don't amend an ordinance because we're heading into uncharted waters, and you don't want to go there. And so if you're going to set by policy how we handle county buildings, and this is specific, be very clear, this is specific for flood. We don't have this anywhere else. Do it by policy. Thank you.
That's a good point.
Yeah, so to that point, and because it's specifically, we don't have many buildings in a floodplain, but in 3, maybe more. I think the thing, and this, Commissioner Gantz, this was the problem I had specifically with Bull Creek. I had 4 different valuations to work with based on, things, and I couldn't explain to people how we got to the 50% because I had 4 valuations. One's from the taxes property appraiser site. One's from his personal upstairs software, and then the third was, the calculation you can come to off the website. It was just so complex, and it would be nice to have a third party give a valuation to the building, and then be able to say, the cost of repair is, we got that as well, and it's, to come up with that 50% ruling. And then it would have been nice to have brought it back to the board to have the discussion about what we wanted to do with it prior to saying goodbye to it. And that was my headache with it, I'll say, and that's what made it feel,
But again, in this case, it was
I
moot
think-
because the building inspector
Correct, that is
said,
absolutely. So I think
For the building.
my final piece on this is I feel like having an appraisal would have been more concrete than the different valuations coming from other areas.
an appraisal on replacement costs for the
Correct.
building.
That's correct.
Okay. All right, well, let's head down that road. Mr. Moylan, do you think that's sort of a good direction to head?
I think we understand the direction.
Right, okay.
I'm going to piggyback onto Ms. Pennington's comment about also coming before the board. I think in policy, it's your domain. I'm not questioning that at all. Other than from a transparency and openness perspective, I would like that determination to be brought to us so that we can have questions answered and then the public itself can be at that meeting. So before any other work goes on, there's a determination made, and then there's, even if it's just a business presentation, a business item presentation where where we just are told the facts. But we get that input, we can ask some questions, and the public can weigh in as well. That's I think, a proper due diligence and way
Commissioner Dents, we're talking about county-owned buildings,
yes,
right? Okay.
absolutely, just county-owned
Okay.
buildings.
No, and I think that's fair. Because when a determination's made that a building is condemned and it's going to be torn down, I agree with you. I think that they should bring that to us and let us hear the facts.
Yeah, I mean,
But
it's-
we're not going to override a
Right, but there's history to the buildings. People they're become so attached to the buildings that I think it's part of the grieving process to come and talk about it. If we determine that it's going to be removed, I think there should be a common sharing of either experiences or thoughts about the building, and I think it's just part of that process of getting over the fact that we're losing an icon on Bull Creek that has been there for a long time. It's not long enough to be historic, but it's in everybody's conscience and has been there, and many memories and experiences made. So,
Commissioner Sullivan.
Yeah, just, I think it's a different point, but it still would have validity. I would also like the same kind of judgment done if we're going to buy a private building and turn it into a government building, which we also had that little problem over the years. So I would think that both cases would be something we should, since we're talking about this right now, would include both cases. They're both going to be county buildings, but one would be we have it and we want to know whether we're going to maintain it or not. The other would be we're going to buy an older building and we want to make sure it's worth what we're going to pay for it and worth doing.
Okay, any other discussion? All right. Okay, Sean and Ms. Petito, you think we okay? You got direction enough? Okay. All right, now.
thank you both.
Thank you all for doing that. I'll now open it up for public comment on this issue. Speakers will have 3 minutes. If you'd like to speak about this issue, please come forward, state your name, and make your comments to me, Chairman. Good afternoon.
Gentlemen, Ms. Bennington.
State your name.
I'm about to, just okay. Here.
And make sure you speak into the mic.
Yeah, I will. I'm Charles Cowart, and I'm speaking on behalf of the community here. I just wanted to thank all of you. You've been very accommodating. You've taken care of me. I'm just here to advocate for both sides here. I think that Mr. Sullivan had brought up several very good points. We are just concerned about, like you said, we like to eat there. We like to sit in the air conditioning and have a meal, whether we're at a food truck or not. That's no concern. We just want to be able to see out there and, the view and whatnot. But mostly we're interested in not just having, a metal building where we can't see out and whatnot. And, the idea of having some sort of a lease, I'm just putting it out there right now so everyone's aware and thinking the way I'm thinking. The way it was before, I don't know, that's just my thoughts. Also, if you do decide to do something, there's the way the construction industry is now, the nature of it is you're a year out before you do anything, basically, before you get through permitting and all that. So, I mean, on y'all's behalf, a pavilion could be a quicker, fix, so to speak, but also, if they wanted to have I'm talking like a Betty Stefflick pavilion type of pavilion, or if they wanted to have, like a cattleman's hall or sorts like the Hall Creek Community Center, that could also be, an option, but it would be an extended period of time just so that they would know instantly, right off rip. But if we could just come to, like some sort of terms as far as, some sort of documented, unilateral agreement, once that we, know what y'all decide on, basically, that you could, let the community kind of know and we could be a part of the, communications and whatnot. I'm going to be here to speak on behalf of the community as a whole, but those are some of my concerns, and kind of then there's a lot of voices from the community also speaking through me right now. And I mean, like I said, I'm not here for one party or the other, and y'all have been very accommodating to me. But we don't want to, we'd like to have air conditioning, but we don't necessarily have to have that. We don't want to have a lease where we have to go and, reserve the community center in order to use it either, so to speak, I know this is kind of unique what I'm asking for, but you give me 3 minutes, so that's what I'm doing, but, it, it would be considered because, like, there's some people that are not just, it wasn't the historical value so much, it was more along the lines of, like, we like to eat there, we like the view, so does Rick Staley and all that. So, when I spoke to him, he sounded like he was definitely an advocate of this too. So I just appreciate your time, and that's all I got to say.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name's Steve Johnson. I'd like to ask, if I could, how much have y'all spent or are y'all planning to spend to tear the building down? Bull Creek Fish Camp. Somebody has budgeted some money somewhere to tear it down. Is that correct?
We'll address that. Keep going.
Okay. My question is, instead of spending that money to tear down the building, why not take the fire departments for training and burn it down? It may cost $15,000, $20,000 to take out the remnants, but look at the $100,000 you're probably saving. Take that money you're going to save from burning it down is fire training, put it in the bank until you decide what you're going to do with the property. If you save $100,000, you can take $20,000 or $30,000 and put it in fill dirt. You've got the sheriff over there that has started a vocational rehab program. Why not use his inmates to help lay the plumbing, do the electrical, do whatever they need to do or whatever they can do to help restore that building? Yes, it's an icon. I went out there the afternoon my father died, my wife and I went out there and sat, and it was the most beautiful sunset that I have ever seen. So the building does have a lot of history, and it's been there a long time. The other thing I want to ask is, have y'all ever been to Louisiana? Everything there is put on pilings or on stem walls or something. The same thing can be done with a restaurant. And if we use in-house labor like the inmates and the money we save, instead of tearing it down and hauling it away by burning it, I think we're money ahead. That's just Steve Johnson speaking. I know y'all are going to do what you want to anyhow, but
Thank you.
I rest my case.
Thank you.
Next speaker. Seeing no one else approach, I'll close public comment and bring it back to the board. Ms. Petito, cost to demolish?
Sir, we were looking to utilize in-house labor. The cost of the rental equipment is $5,000 for a month, and then we're estimating the disposal to be somewhere around $10,000. So total is $15,000 using in-house
people.
labor,
Yeah,
yes.
okay, thank you very much. All right, the next topic is the HOA Dunes Restoration Agreement discussion.
Can I follow up it's to see if Chief has looked at it, to see if it's a viable training, or is it too close to the water? Does it pose too much of a hazard to the water?
I think based on the components inside there, it runs a risk. When you burn stuff, typically there's toxins, so I wouldn't recommend doing that.
Okay,
You had campers all around that, on both sides.
that's true too. We've got active campers.
And, Mr. Chair, just one other thing as we close this out. I hope we do have future discussions about what we can do out there, whether it's in the form of a community center or pavilion or what have you, some combination. I'm looking for staff to come back with ideas and suggestions, as part of the Parks and Rec plan.
The master plan.
The master plan, yeah. I'm hoping we're going to address that. A year ago, we didn't think we would have had to address it, but we do now, so I'm hoping.
I think we will.
I'm
I
hoping
think-
there's another iteration to this, because I think it is important property, and I would not be in favor of the county giving up control of that whole complex, because I think we're the best stewards to be able to protect it and take care of it. So I just hope that's part of the discussion. And last I'll say is, I'm open to any and all suggestions of ways that we can continue to have that as one of our great amenities.
Yeah, I don't think there's an argument. It's probably one of the most beautiful parks we have, so.
Mr. Chairman, I just wanted to say the same thing, that we are doing a Parks and Recreation Entertainment studies right now, and I hope that, what I would call Bull Creek Park at Dead Lake is part of that study, because I actually think that place, if you do it right, fix it up with the RV storage and better dock for boats and stuff, could pay for itself. I think you could charge enough cost for people who stay with their RVs there and dockage fees, that you could, I think the operational costs could be covered. But I may be wrong on that, but that's why we're doing the Parks and Recreation study.
All right, so now move on to item 5, HOA Dunes Restoration Agreement discussion. Sean, are you going to lead that?
Yes, Chairman. So I think everyone knows now the seriousness of the situation. The erosion on our coastline is increasing exponentially. And even though we've only been hit by these basically Category 1 type storms, we are now facing an existential threat to our way of life. If we were to take a major hurricane, a direct hit, we would be changed forever, basically. The Hammock Dunes Homeowners Association has been attempting to comply with the FEMA rules and to make their beach FEMA eligible for funding. And they approached the county with an agreement that furthers that effort. It is an easement agreement, but it has a lot more in it as well. It is an agreement that is intended to create future agreements as funding becomes available. The premise is that the county would maintain the beaches along that stretch of the county, and with the goal of preserving the public preservation stretch of land, with restoring the dunes to protect the communities, the hundreds of homes that are behind it, all serving a public purpose. The HOA put in a lot of homework. They assembled a lot of documents going back to the 80s when the DRI was approved, maps, a lot of research went into this. They presented the agreement to the county staff, and we proceeded to exchange edits. The agreement went back and forth several times with revisions, and we reached a point where we really needed to turn to the board for direction. County staff feels a little hesitant that the agreement may cause us to overcommit and underdeliver. So we continued to massage the wording to make it clear that all of this is contingent upon a dedicated source of funding, which does not yet exist. That's kind of where we left it off when we decided, okay, we really should present this to the board, and the HOA was requesting that, and they deserve that. So we're here today presenting the agreement, which was emailed to you, board members, last week in its current draft state. Again, I want to reiterate the concerns of staff that this is a document that is intended to be perpetual in nature. So it could be other individuals sitting in these chairs many years from now interpreting the words we've put together. And any ambiguity is only going to create confusion. We don't want to build up an expectation in that community that we can't live up to. And so our view was, why not for right now have just a simple agreement in place, a few pages long, that emphasizes the public purpose that would be served by restoration of those dunes, and to enter into an agreement like this down the road when the funding is in place. However, the HOA urged that we move forward with this agreement, with having the details now, but not obligating the county's general fund presently. And that's kind of where it's at right now in front of you with the words on the page. Mr. Davis, Mr. Eckert, and their team are here. I think you certainly should hear from them. And I guess that's all I have as a presentation. But certainly we can talk about any of the specifics in there if you'd like.
Well, I think the key is we need a perpetual agreement. And that's the attempt here, is to get a perpetual easement. And I agree, there's a lot of verbiage associated with that. Donnie?
Are the Army Corps easements perpetual?
Yes,
So we're already entering into perpetual agreements right now with all of those other landowners.
yes, they're 50 years, so essentially perpetual, yes.
Okay?
The goal is to have that kind of agreement for the entire 18 miles. That's the goal.
Yes, and if you recall, several months ago, you approved Phase 1 of a funding study. I'm not sure the status of that, but it was in the nature of a survey that would be online and a brochure for folks for us to gauge their willingness to pay for renourishing the beach. We also have direction to eventually have a beach management plan in place. That has been and is our goal. That eventually would cover, hopefully, the entire coastline of the county.
Yes. Commissioners?
We, is,
We'll have a
can have more
presentation.
presentation? Because I have a lot of other questions, but I figured I'd wait until.
Okay, well, let's let the Hammock Dunes Owners Association make a presentation. Mr. Davis.
Good, okay, good. Well, first of all, I'm Greg Davis, president of Hammock Dunes Owners Association. And I'm going to put on my glasses, too, so I can see what I'm talking about.
Sure.
Okay, thank you. So, okay. So I want to begin by first thanking the commissioners for having us here today and the opportunity to discuss the final draft of the HDOA perpetual easement at this workshop and at the April 17th vote, we hope, as well. HDOA is not attempting to transfer liability to the county in this easement. HDOA and the county's success in the north is dependent upon the successful implementation and completion of the Flagler Beach Army Corps and FDOT projects. Again, I want to emphasize that. Those projects must stay on an announced schedule with the dredge beginning in the spring of 2024. Previous delays have been numerous. A1A has been costly. Businesses have been disrupted. Continued delays around easement issues must be immediately resolved. On your screen right now is an email from the County Legal Department requesting HDOA accept postponement of the perpetual easement as it is premature, replaced by a temporary project-based 2023 emergency repair easement, waiting for beach management plan to be completed and adopted, wait until local funding plan is designed and put in place, wait until state and federal funding is secured, wait to discuss perpetual easements for the north part of the county. Only a few paragraphs, roughly about 200 words, need to be resolved. Obviously, HDOA's response today is to ask the BOCC to reject the recommendations of the legal department and to adopt the HDOA perpetual easement in 2 weeks on the 17th. The legal department is asking the North communities to follow the legal policy and strategy implemented on the Flagler County southern shoreline. The legal department implemented easements signing serially, and again, serially, after the Army Corps funding. Soliciting easements have been a process for 4 years and is still not done. HDOA is not interested in replicating the past 20 years of county experience where no sand has been placed on the dune and beach in the southern 6 miles of the county, and on the southern 6 miles of the county as of April 2023. We're not interested in replicating that process. On the screen now is a front-end easement approach that HCOA is promoting. This allows several actions to be undertaken in parallel. Seabed sand sampling, seabed mining, plans, permits can be contracted, and aspects of the branch management plan and local funding can be done in parallel. Legal must not delay this process. HCOA is offering a perpetual easement to the county now, followed by an effort to collect all northern perpetual easements, then spending public monies on studies, permits, and leases. It cannot be later delayed easements and holdouts. Holdouts can be identified easily. So again, I think the major distinction we're doing in approach is that it's done in parallel, not serial. And that's really key. I think that goes to a lot of issues we're dealing with today. The BOCC has stated many times in meetings and in writing that the BOCC believes it is in the public interest for the county to provide administrative stewardship for the full 18 miles of shoreline. For this to be achieved, private landowners have to offer perpetual easements to the county as grantors, and the county has to accept the role of grantee administrator. For Hammock Dunes, our offer document is before you, and three volunteer attorneys have reviewed it, and it finds that we are not we are harmless to the county, which again I think is important. Use of public funds on private lands is illustrated in this slide. Federal and state entities will certainly be reassured by the counties achieving northern perpetual easements over the next several months. It will demonstrate broad citizen support for the county as the shoreline administrator, realizing that all powers of federal, state, local government is stopped in the track if property owners won't sign perpetual easements. There's no surprise in what a beach management plan is going to tell us. The 101 shoreline transects tell the story from 1972 until 2023. Sand is eroded again and again on the dune because there is sand deficit on the near shore. In the interim, while studies are being completed with perpetual easements in place, the county will have established a public purpose which should make the counties eligible for federal and state grants for our portion of the dune. The county should consider ordaining various public purpose for the entire dune once all perpetual easements are collected. The target is to do this in 4 months. Representatives from Ocean Hammock, from Painters Hill, from Hammock Beach, and from DCDD are here today, and when we come to the public comment section, to offer their support and enthusiasm in getting this done with HDOA as their model. We all understand the economics of high-cost truck sand, various low cost of offshore dredge sand when large quantities are being placed. Data is provided in this illustration. The lower right red circle data points is the desired operating points. The county has approved a study to expand the offshore sand lease to accommodate much larger quantities of sand. There's a proposal pending in county engineering for expanding the county joint coastal permit north to Jungle Hut, allowing us use of dredged sand. Delay in achieving front-end perpetual easements in the north, as recommended by legal, delays the possibility to maximize the use of the dredge. County engineering has and is making great progress in applying and receiving grants and implementing emergency sand repairs in 2023. As soon as front-end perpetual easements are achieved by HDOA and northern property owners, the process of the county application for and obtaining grants should be enhanced. This should be especially for FEMA Category G, with the county as permanent shoreline administrator. FEMA facility maintenance may allow sand volumes to return the dune and the beach to pre-storm conditions for future storms. Given Flagler County's legal department, given Flagler County's legal department's track record on easement, I am at a loss to why the county legal department would want to delay property owners voluntarily providing perpetual easements in partnership with the county. I am baffled by the legal department's commitment to the strategy and policy that for 4 years over budgeted time, Flagler Beach not yet resolved and has cost FDOT, FDEP, USACE, and the community millions of dollars. I do not understand the county's legal department's risk model and cost model that supports their strategy. This is why this workshop discussion is important. I'm not going to spend any time on this chart today, only to say that we encourage the BOCC to move forward with a local funding plan in shoreline management. In the interest of time, I'm not going to read through all of these summary points. They're there for you to see. But I think that it's key that it makes up for not yet done BMP grants. I mean, our situation is what it is, but I think it provides tremendous benefit to the county. In summary, we ask the BOCC to advance the process of achieving perpetual easements for the northern 12 miles, starting with H2OA, by deciding this policy matter this month. We believe this is a policy decision to be made by the BOCC at the April 17th regular meeting. I thank you for this opportunity and will accept any questions.
Thank you, Greg. Commissioners?
Greg, we can probably also address directly what Sean brought up. And
Dave, would you state your name for the record?
Dave Eckert, Hammock Dunes. The concerns that you brought up, Sean, are greatly appreciated. And the fact that you would say that the staff is concerned about overcommitting and underperforming, I think that Mother Nature gives us almost no choice in the matter relative to taking on this risk together. And it offers so many opportunities between us that we're only several paragraphs apart. And if we could just continue the process that's been underway for 6 months, I think this can be accomplished. So we understand that we're all overcommitting to trying to achieve a schedule that's very difficult to do, to expand the use of the dredge. But there's so many benefits associated with this, we should not shy away from it.
Thank you.
And also, Mr. Chair, if I can add too, that within the perpetual easement documentation we have, that it's flexible to be amended and to be changed based on changing situations. When a beach management plan is put in place, then we would adopt the document to the beach management plan. But the question is, given where we are today, we don't have the time. I mean, we flatly don't have the time. In 3 years, we may not have a dune. We appreciate kindly the 6 cubic yards of emergency sand that's going in place. But let's put that in perspective. Through normal activity, we lose, without a storm, we lose 3 cubic yards of sand per year based on current beach conditions. It's not that it's not a fear of just a Category 1 hurricane. As we look at Nicole and Ian, those were essentially big nor'easters. That was not a hurricane. They were not big storms by any sense. But it's the condition of the beach that caused the erosion. We know, based on evidence, that we cannot even take a strong nor'easter. We see that damage as evidence in Nicole and Ian. I have to say that what I do know in life is that bad news does not improve with age. What I do know is to decide not to decide is to cause a decision of greater consequence. And we are paying greater consequences now.
Thank you, Greg. Commissioners, comments, questions?
Mr. Chairman.
Dave.
Yeah, just a very general statement that I believe within this board, since I've been here, we have decided we want to keep the beaches. And one of the objectives was to get our beaches to the point where we will have, once we have the Army Corps program, where they're kind of I forget, you can give me the correct term, federal beaches. This is a step towards doing that for other than the beach that's being done by the Army Corps program. If I'm wrong on that, but this Board of County Commissioners has made that an objective in the past, and we've agreed to that. So this is, the way I look at this, is this the right time now to start moving in that direction? And this perpetual easement would be an example of that. Am I off base on that, or is
No,
that?
that's correct. This would be the first of many perpetual easements that we would have to achieve soon. And I think that's why we're agonizing over this one so hard, because this could be the model moving forward. So as I read the document, and the only fear I have is overcommitting the county to money that we don't have. And I think I had that one, I think you cleaned that one up for me. That's gone away. And I'd have to release Sean Moylan, but I didn't see any more where it just hit me in the head and said, darn, that's going to cost us money. So, I think that you've solved that problem. And as Sean said, what was his term? We don't want to overcommit and underproduce. Yeah, and I understand that concern. But in my reading of it, as I said, I found that, you fixed that for me. And so I don't know. I agree that the issue is this easement cannot commit the county to do something we don't have money to do. That's the fear. And I think you cleaned it up. But I am not a lawyer.
Yes.
So,
Well, we've had 3 lawyers that have taken a look at that. And I think that, as Sean would agree, that the commitment is defined based on a project. Okay, so there's no commitment made but by a project. And I got to tell you that as president of HDOA, we have the same issue. I cannot commit our HDOA to something in the future that has not been defined. So I think it's the framework that goes in place. And I also think it's getting tasks done in parallel. And I also think that there's a significant benefit to the county when they're working on in partnership with the community. I think that's very important. So again, what I would urge the commission on is this is something that HDOA is prepared to do today. Ocean Hammock as well is very excited about this opportunity and interested in getting it done themselves, as well as Hammock Beach, and as well as DCDD. So we will work hard with you together on that.
Well, I think if you think about it, just the simple approach to this, what we need is a document that says if there's a plan and there's money to fund the plan, we both agree to execute the plan. It's that simple. So does this document do that?
Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Can I ask a few questions?
Sure.
So, Sean, this document as drafted, does it in any way obligate the county to spend 1 penny of county resources?
No, I think I've done a good enough job of qualifying the language to make it clear that we're not obligating our current funds. The only obligations that are on us presently, if we approve this today as written, is to go seek funding. That is something that's something we're already doing, but that's the only obligation now. Once the funding's identified, it triggers all these other requirements.
And it doesn't, as proposed, it protects the county from any transfer of liability from the owners association to us.
Right.
correct?
That was never a concern.
Right.
Yeah.
And, thinking about this, it's our position, I'm just reading from some notes that I made in reviewing all the documents. Isn't our position about protecting the shoreline and public purpose strengthened by each one of these easements where property owners agree for us to be able to
Yes, sir, that is
prepare?
correct.
So, that's something that we declared public purpose for the whole 18 miles of our shoreline, and this would just bolster that argument, correct?
Yes, it would.
And I would assume that it's much more efficient to have these easements in place, especially even if we have to take emergency measures, because they're in place and we don't have to enact any emergency powers each and every time we want to do repairs. Would that be
Yes,
accurate?
this
too?
document would authorize us to move right in after a storm and do emergency repairs without having to sign another easement.
So given that, and looking at that email that, it's a public document, so I mean, they can
That's
discuss it.
perfectly fine.
And full disclosure, I did meet with the Owners Association, and they were very helpful in briefing me on a lot of this information. So what was staff's rationale for wanting to go in the exact order of beach management plan, dedicated funding source identification, and then work on the easements?
So, thank you for that question. It gives me a chance to respond a bit. For one, I want the HOA to understand that I don't have any sort of veto power, and I was communicating the views of the staff. And just as this board gives me direction, I also take direction from staff. The lead up to the document that you see involved a lot of edits, and the document as first presented to us was quite a bit different than what you're seeing now. And I think we've got the language in a way now that we're safe. But the concern was, given how we got to where we were, that there was an expectation on the other side that a lot of things would happen in short order. That if there's any ambiguity in this document, that they would look at it one way and we would look at it a different way. So it had to do with the history of how we got to where we were. However, the language now it's as a fact, it does not obligate the general fund presently. It obligates us to go find funding, and once we do, then a whole host of obligations will kick in.
So I still have the floor?
Yes, you have the floor.
Can I just add to one other thing? We can't really compare this to obtaining easements in Flagler Beach because the Army Corps easement is something that really scares property owners. The verbiage in it, that we're not allowed to change a single comma. And so you might recall after Hurricane Matthew, we obtained approximately 150 temporary easements in short order because we were able to control the verbiage. And if someone didn't want to sign, we could simply skip over their property. That's not the case with the Army Corps project. So it's not the right comparison.
So you're making your case for getting this done because we can customize it because it's an agreement between two parties and it's not a boilerplate document that cannot be altered at all, as the Army Corps documents are. I would also, in thinking about the whole Army Corps project, one of the reasons that I that I was in favor of it, well, a lot of reasons, but one of them in particular was I felt that, and I've said this on a number of occasions, I was not obligating any future county commission to any financial responsibility or any financial obligation. And so that's why I wanted to get clear on this as well. And if I could, Mr. Chair, just a few other observations. In thinking about all of this and looking through the briefing documents, a few things struck me from the Owners Association presentation. It most certainly is a public interest. And protecting that shoreline is, as they say, it's a de facto protector of the whole coastal basin there, and all the lands to the west of it too, which include a lot of public structures and roadways and very valuable property. And if there was a slide that Greg had in his presentation that showed property values, and I know he glossed over it pretty quick, but the fact is, those property values are substantial, and would be and flooding in that area. If we do have a total disaster and we've done nothing to stop it, that water is going to flow right down into Palm Coast, into the whole canal sections, and puts thousands of properties at peril. All
true.
If I see this right, of those 12 miles, 5 of the miles are controlled by 4 property owners. So, by the Owners Association taking the leadership here, it's given us this model that hopefully we can, as they indicated, we can work with the other property owners and just bite off a quick 5 of the 12 miles already and get them done as fast as possible. So I think it serves as a model to continue to, to coordinate on the shoreline plan. I think it also, for us, would show good faith with the state and federal entities that we're not just worried about emergency assistance, that we're committed to a long-term plan, and hopefully it'll be supported by the beach management plan when we get it done. And I understand wanting to have a logical process here, but in this case, when we have a willing owner or set of owners, 1,182 to be exact, in the Owners Association that are willing to come forward like this and show leadership, I think it behooves us to try to push this thing and get it done. And I appreciate the work that you all have done so far, and let's just get it over the goal line and get finished with it and get on to the next ones quickly. Thank you.
Mr. Dance?
He's looking at
Is
me.
you-
Well, I'm all things new to beach management, but ever since I've been here, every month we talk about one particular holdout, and really how she's been able to, really keep this county on our toes. And the fact that they've come together and voluntarily placed their time to offer this to us, I think, is remarkable. The one thing I would tell the other residents in Flagler County is they have a very unique ecosystem over in Hammock Dunes, and they really are kind of like the first line of defense when the storms come in to our intercoastal and all the way out to the west. So, I don't understand legal's argument in this particular email because, we're attorneys and the verbiage can be written to protect the county as well, and I think there could be a happy medium with the HOA. So I applaud you for coming forward with this. I don't see, the issue if we are to protect the entire 18 miles, or if that is our goal here. I think it's better to move along with this.
Thank you. Mr. Dance?
Thank you. Just a few comments. I echo a lot of what Donnie had said. I think Commissioner O'Brien laid out a pretty good process for why it's important in the public interest with, like you said, the ecosystem of the hammock and the barrier island as it is, and protecting assets. So the public purpose and continuing those public purpose easements is important. The few things that concern me is the ambiguity. I think at its core, a perpetual easement to cover the dunes is a simple agreement. And we've taken a simple agreement and complicated it to the nth degree. And I'm not sure I understand exactly why it is so. I did have a presentation, like I think most of us did with the HOA. So I'm still confused as to how it is so complex to the point that it is, which leads to confusing language and ambiguity. And I will rely on Sean's expertise to make sure that we are protected and not committing future commissions to unnecessary legal expense or expenditures. And correct me if I'm wrong. I think, Mr. Davis, I almost heard an ultimatum in your, and that scares me. I've lost to where it was an ongoing communication to where you're getting an ultimatum that this is our last shot at this, and that bothers me because I think there needs to be time for me to have satisfaction that our legal team has looked at those other remaining areas that need to be properly vetted. I don't know if that's this meeting, the next meeting in the month, or the first meeting in May. I don't know how long you think we need to get to where, at least in my opinion, to where I'm comfortable with the complexity of the agreement and our commitments, and making sure the ambiguity is out of there. I do worry with such a lengthy agreement that there is room in there for, as we've seen in PUDs. It's that when we review PUDs, we've come down to a single word of whether we're committing ourselves to funds or getting something approved. And now we're looking at the length of this agreement, and that bothers me. So I want to make sure you have proper time to do the review.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, just a couple of things to follow up. I agree with Commissioner O'Brien, just about everything he said, so I'm not going to go through all that again. I also agree that it was very important for the staff to look hard at this, which they've done, and apparently have reached a lot of agreement on this document. I don't think there's a lot left. I also understand in this day and age that legal documents can't be simple. They have to be complex because there are too many possibilities and precedents that in the legal system, so you have to cover that kind of thing, and thank God I don't have to do that. I don't have to do that writing because it's hard. So I do think it has to be somewhat complex because it is a significant document, but it's about one fact, basically, the perpetual agreement. By the way, the only thing that's really perpetual is taxes. We know that they're going to be here forever. There are enough provisions in here that we can make changes to this. Finally, this isn't the first time we've addressed the whole 18 miles of beach. We have a thing called the dry sand ordinance that we approved that actually affects people's property. You know, until that point, we did the dry sand ordinance, you could own the property down to the high water line. And so the dry sand ordinance gave us access to the dry sand. And this talks about that, when it talks about the dune as opposed to the actual dry sand part of the thing. The other thing that I love, talk about simplicity. We only had to have one signature here for this part of the beach. I mean, when I think of all the problems we've had, no matter what you say, and it wasn't just the last person, there were a lot of ups and downs on getting all the easements just for the Army Corps program. We've got another one going on now for north of there. And so it's hard for me to understand why we wouldn't want to do this. And so far, I haven't heard anything that makes it sound like it's the wrong thing to do. We're going to be hurt by it. So that's kind of where I am. I'm kind of in agreement with what everybody said. And I do think we need to keep pushing right to the end, but I don't have a problem. We bring this up on the 17th.
No, I agree. I think we should be able to settle this soon. Sean, just a big question. Is there a showstopper in the current document?
No. We need a direction from the board. I think we've got that.
Good.
The last handful of edits could be handled, I think, pretty quickly. We've gone back and forth several times, and there were just a few requests from the HOA in the last iteration, and I think we can get through that in pretty short order.
Well, I think we have to. If it's going to be on the 17th, and we publish the agenda 10 days in advance, when, tomorrow?
The due date was actually March 27th to make it on that agenda.
April 27th. No. Oh,
March 27th was the due date to get on that agenda.
Okay, so we have time.
No, you've
No, we don't have
passed
Be the
that.
following
go to the
meeting.
next one.
It would be the beginning of May. It would be the first meeting in May that you would see this in front of you.
Okay, I'm having trouble with the math.
The 27th is coming on to get onto the April 17th meeting agenda.
Got it.
So,
Or we could have a special
plus it would
So-
give them time, as Commissioner Dance said, just to finish buttoning up their.
So what's the drop dead date on making that agenda?
On the first, I don't know what the drop dead is, but it's certainly doable, very doable.
April 30th.
2 weeks.
April 20th.
Okay, so then we'll put it in stone. You got 2 weeks to get this done, right? So 2 weeks to get it done. One thing I will point out about the easements, you know how this one lady has destroyed our plans. We don't have that on the rest of the beach. If somebody says, I'm not going to sign the easement, we just go around them and keep putting sand on the beach. So as you recall, the last time we did this, there were 11 holdouts, and a couple of them have paid dearly for not letting us put sand in front of their property. So anyway, that's good. Anything? Don?
Yeah, I just left out one other thing. It's my understanding that the that coastal preservation area, if you will, is 5.4 miles. That's part of that DRI, goes back to 1984, correct?
Yes.
So I would just hope we could just use this to cover that whole area, this model, if we get this one done.
Yeah.
And get to those other ones, which I think just is just a couple, 2, 3 property owners.
Yeah, Donnie, that's good. That's very important because that's significant, that area. It's
Yeah.
been that way for a long time. It hadn't been recognized.
And, I mean, heck, the document only has 3 pages of whereases, so you could knock out the first 3 and the last 2 are nonsense, so it's only a few. But take your point, Commissioner Dance. Take your point.
Very well. We'll now open to public comment. If you'd like to speak, please come to the microphone and state your name. We'll give you 3 minutes. Please address your comments to the chair.
Good afternoon. Kim Carney, Flagler Beach. I was one of those commissioners in Flagler Beach that developed the beach management plan. I was also very instrumental in the Army Corps project. I sat in on, I don't know, maybe 25 meetings. All right, it's not an Army Corps project. But 2 years before the word Army Corps project hit Flagler Beach, so did probably 800 letters from an eminent domain lawyer. It takes one lawyer in Tampa Bay, Florida, to write one letter to 1,100 people to tell them why they should not sign that document. So we sit in this chamber, and the Army Corps sits up in Jacksonville. And one of the only things I personally asked the county to do was when I got a hold of that first letter, I gave it to legal at the county level and asked them to be proactive and come out with some type of strategy to keep people from believing it was eminent domain. So whatever you do, just don't forget those words, because that is what hurt Flagler Beach. Not our plan. We already had a beach management plan. Not that fact that we needed sand because we already had a sand study. Not the feasibility study. All that was done. What killed us was that lawyer in Tampa telling people that they should not sign anything until the county paid them for eminent domain. So sooner the better. This is a proactive approach. Sand is not going to become an abundance. And for your citizens to tell you loud and clear that they're ready and willing to step up to this, because it'll take one lawyer to destroy everything that you guys have done.
Thank you, Kim. Next speaker.
Good afternoon. My name is Greg Pugh. I'm the district manager for the Dunes Community Development District, and I'm here in that capacity to read a statement from our supervisors and let you know, although the Dunes Community Development District has not discussed the specifics of the perpetual easement in a board meeting, the Dunes Community Development District Board is in general support of efforts to renourish and/or rebuild the dunes, especially given the fact in the last couple of hurricanes, we've lost utility and stormwater facilities to the hurricanes. So we are in support of this. Thank you.
Thank you. Next speaker. Jim?
Yes, Jim Olsemer. I'm on the board of directors of the Ocean Hammock Property Owners Association. We have 178 property owners represented. And I see where the sentiment is going, and there's an old saying, when you think you may have made the sale, don't talk yourself out of it. But I do want to support the great work that Hammock Dunes has done, and to say that we support this, and you'll have no problem getting our community to back the signing of the easement on our side. So, thank you very much.
And you're next. We're coming to you next. Finally, yeah. Next speaker.
Good afternoon, Mr. Commissioner, Commissioners, Mr. Chairman. Carlton Grant, Managing Director for Hammock Beach Club, and Brad Howard, General Manager for the club. We represent the ownership of the club, the 0.9 miles of beach in front of Hammock Beach, and we both were with the property from 2004 through current. We've seen multiple storms. We've seen the beach erode on a regular basis to the point where during both Ian and Nicole, the waves breached the dunes, flooded the golf course. It took bulldozers to get the sand off the beach. And I think it is a lot easier to work with the county than try and do it alone and work with the other communities. We are very much supportive of what Hammock Dunes is presenting today. Thank you.
Thank you, Brad. Next speaker. Steve?
I'm Steve Davis. I live in Painters Hill. I live in the area between the 5.4 miles of the Hammock Dunes DRI, Hammock Dunes, Ocean Hammock, and Hammock Beach, and the current Corps of Engineers and FDOT projects down in Flagler Beach. I want to speak in support of this easement and suggest that I will do everything I can in Painters Hill to get a similar set of easements signed with the property owners there. Thank you.
Thank you, Steve. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, whoops. Guys, I have to be a little quicker out there.
I'm old, what can I say? James Fisk, Mr. Chairman. I totally agree with what the HDOA is doing. I think they've done a fantastic job. I just need to point out one thing that they have said, and they said it 2 or 3 times. 3 HDOA lawyers have looked over it in their own, and basically in their own interest. But the lawyer that counts is the Flagler County attorney, who represents the interest of the entire county, which is really the only thing that matters. Thank you.
Thank you, James. Next speaker. Seeing no one approach, I'll close out public comment. Thank you all very much. That was a good discussion. Next up is rules of procedure discussion. And Ms. Petito, are you leading that? Who's leading that?
I can certainly start. As you know, this item was brought up at the March 6th workshop, and staff was instructed to bring it back again today on April 3rd to go over rules of procedure and code of conduct. This was in order to provide you time to evaluate what was provided to you and to provide some comments or feedback, mark up any information that we had given you. I know that there were a few topics that had come up, whether there be language for adding something to the agenda, bringing it up under commissioner comment for consensus before adding it to an agenda item, for instance, was one of the things that was mentioned previously, as well as, could we look at adding some sort of a remote connection to gain quorum. I think the comment that was brought up that day was in regards to like Northeast Florida Regional Council where they lacked participation. Is that something we can do? Again, onboarding of new commissioners with an orientation process or program. I know that we were asked to take a look at Exhibit C, advisory boards, which ones are statutorily required and which ones are not. And then I think there was mention of the Volusia County Code of Conduct, and then comments were going to be sent to legal or admin. So the comments that we received were, whatever we collected from that day. I don't believe we received any other additional comments unless you have any to share with us today.
I didn't get any sent to you, but I marked up mine to talk about.
That's fine.
all.
Yeah, and I apologize, I looked at it over the weekend. I did have one thing, error that I didn't understand, and it was about the agenda itself, and who approves it, and when does it get approved, and what can we as county commissioners and whoever's sitting in this position, the chair, do as far as adding or subtracting things from the agenda. So it kind of troubled me, that paragraph, and so I was almost of the mind, and I'm going to bring it up, see what my commissioners think, that rather than draw a line through the chair as not being able to participate, I would think that no agenda should be published without the chair approval. He'd be the final, when it's all put together, send it to the chair, he looks at it, says, fine, go with it. I think that in the grand scheme of things, that's kind of our job. So I don't know how my other commissioners think about that, but I think that if a commissioner has something he wants on an agenda, we ought to consider it. And then it would be fair to have the chair, whoever the chair is, make the decision whether to add it or not.
Well, my
It's up
experience
to you guys.
is that the chair and the administrator work together in a collaborative effort to put together an agenda. And mainly the chair is there to review things because we are part of, a wider outreach, if you will, and can have some positive input in the agenda on whether something is presented correctly. And I think it's important. Be it mandated that is in there is a good point for discussion. I just know that in my position, I look forward to a very collaborative working agreement and numerous meetings to talk about the agenda because that's what I'm used to. I think we are, as a board, though, we are a team and I don't think one person should have the authority to place something on an agenda or take it off. I think together we work in consensus to bring those things forward. Otherwise, we're wasting staff time and valuable resources if nothing has consensus to move forward. And I think that we discussed that last time. I think that's why chair was written through it because not any single one person should be able to place an item on the agenda. But working together with the administrator, I think there should be a review of the agenda, whether that's written in there or it just becomes part of our working procedures.
Yeah, I agree with that. We're not doing that now.
Right.
We're not.
Exactly.
But I would be very glad to step into that role. I mean, I would, that's part of my job, I think.
Right.
So,
I think ultimately, the administrator has a wider breadth of what's going on within the departments and the backup and leading that agenda process. But I think it's important, again, it could be in an individual's basis of the chair's strength of whether they participate in that or not. I mean, I look forward to having that kind of working relationship.
and I would like to have that as well. I would. Ms. Sullivan?
Yeah, the point, Andy's points are well taken, and so are yours. If we add something to the agenda after the agenda is published, we have to get approval at the meeting. You know
We
how
have to
do
vote,
it?
we have to
So if we
agree.
have to do it for that, if you follow through the logic of that, there should be some agreement by getting the agenda out early, and you taking a look at it, and the rest of us taking a look at it. So to a degree, we do that in a more official way than we're doing it now. The only time we officially do that right now is when we add an agenda item late in the process after the agenda is published, then we do discuss it and we get a chance to agree or not agree to that addition. So there probably is a need to have wording or something in there that gives us a shot to do that. And how we go about doing it, we all should be participating in that process leading up to the meeting, like Andy said. But I do think maybe there has to be one person designated to me, and that would be the chairman, as kind of, okay, go forward with the agenda.
Yeah, and I think, the the chair should have 24 hours to look at it.
So,
Donnie?
well, we're governed by the Constitution. We don't have a charter. So, I mean, it's my understanding that the chair's position is a ministerial position. The commission empowers the chair to sign documents after a vote that we have or an action that we take, and to represent us maybe at public or at community events, things like that. But I would not be in favor of giving up not one sentence of my authority as an elected commissioner for the county. And so if you give the chair the opportunity to review or have veto or say of or input before it's published and it's developed, then that, in essence, you're taking away some of my authority. Now, if any commissioner wants to add an item to the agenda at our meeting, you raise it as an issue, we vote on, discuss it, vote on it, then the agenda is altered. And that, I think, follows a good legal procedure, and probably, I mean, that is the way kind of we've been doing things. But I would not be in favor of having the chair have any more power, and it's not anything to do with anyone in the chair at this time before past. I'm just thinking about it from a procedural and a structural standpoint. I would not be in favor of diminishing my authority as an equal elected commissioner. Other organizations, the city, they have a charter, and they can empower the mayor with different powers based on that legal document, that charter. But we don't have that. We're supposed to follow the Constitution.
Well, if you look at our description of what the chair does, there's no extra authority at all, other than to run the meeting and keep order. That's my job. Yeah. So I get your point. So what have we decided?
So we'll leave it as administrator, but I think it's up to each chair or each commission as well, to have as much communication with the administrator as they see fit to understand the material.
Mr. Sullivan?
Yeah, I agree with that last statement. That's the way it is now, and so forth. But I think the point the chair was making is that, okay, so two of us want to remove an item from the agenda and two of us don't. Doesn't there have to be an arbitrator on something in that kind of a situation? And I think that would fall to an administrative process, but it would give the chair a little more influence over what ends up on the agenda. So I don't think we're asking our county administrator to treat each of us like, okay, I've got to get Donnie O'Brien's permission for the agenda, then I got, I think that puts her in an almost.
But we don't want to add work. We don't want to add work. We do not want to add work.
Right. So I think it only would occur when it would revert back to the chair, when we would have some kind of discussion like that, where it appears that there's a real split in the commission as to whether or not we want to bring an item forward. At some point, that would have to be worked out prior to the meeting or voted on at the meeting. But I do think there is already a basis to say that there has to be some agreement from the board as to what ends up on the agenda. And how we go about doing that is not as clear as I would like it to be.
Well, I think what we've changed, the prior rules said the chair could add an item to the agenda.
That's what it says.
We struck through that.
Yeah,
Right.
they
So
struck
that's
through
where we're going to leave it. Is that what this discussion just said? We're going to leave the strike through in place.
I think. Not positive yet, but I think, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
So is there an advantage that one commissioner takes, when the agenda is ready to be published, that one commissioner, and in this case the chair, just takes a look at it and says, I don't see anything bad or whatever, and that's it, just a quick, okay, fine. Is there any advantage to that, of doing that before it's published?
Well, under that guidance, you can give a recommendation to, under the way it is now, you could give a recommendation if you wanted to change something to the administrator, but
At the meeting. I mean,
are you, back up, prior to the meeting or at the meeting?
prior to the meeting is what I'm talking about.
Right. So if you read through the agenda and wanted to make a suggestion for a change, you can make the suggestion, but as it is written now, the administrator can accept or deny it. The agenda is under her authority. Her and the county attorney can place items on the agenda as it's written now. So you can review it and make suggestions, and they'll take that into council and maybe change it or not.
Do you think that as a commissioner, not a chairman, but as a commissioner, you're 3 weeks out from a commission meeting and you've got a burning issue and you want it on the agenda? We can't have a meeting to discuss that. Do you think that you should be able to put it on the agenda, or do you think you should have to wait till the actual meeting and then bring it up?
Currently, it should be brought forward as a consensus, in my opinion.
At the meeting?
At the meeting.
I agree with that, Mr. Chair.
That's what you think? There should not be a single commissioner can put something on the agenda without the rest of us voting on it?
Right.
Well,
Okay, all right, I agree with that.
this is only once the agenda is published, because we do talk to the staff if we have an item. If the staff agrees that it's an item that should be on the agenda, that's how it's formulated. We don't go in and say, these are the 12 items we want on the agenda next week. We don't do that. The county administrator does that.
Well, and we have to make sure the language is in there that you can't do that.
But we don't direct staff.
No, we don't direct staff.
So, but we can still, okay. I'd say it's a timing issue. There could be an issue that we've been working on for a number of months or something like that, and the county staff is aware that it's an issue, so they decide to put it on the agenda. And you could say, well, that was Commissioner Dance's thing. He's been working that for the last 6 months, and he finally got it on the agenda. I think that's different than actually closer to the actual meeting, putting something on the agenda. So I don't know. I think we've got to be careful the way we word this. I really think you can get yourself in trouble on this one if we're not careful.
What wording do you want to change?
I think that we should eliminate the item that's in there right now.
The one that's already, there's a line through it already. Just leave that line.
The way it's written is good.
Except for that.
Except for what?
What's the line to say? I want to say it the right way. The line that you can do right now.
Mr. Chair, the current rule in place is that the chair, any commissioner can add an item to the agenda, as well as the county administrator and the county attorney. Based on the last workshop, I struck through chair and any commissioner. So now, if you agree with that language, it would be the county administrator and the county attorney setting the agenda. Or if a commissioner wants something added to the agenda, they would need the consensus of the board. So it would have to be.
Which means you have to do it in the meeting
It would have to
itself.
be in the sunshine.
In the
right.
meeting itself.
Right,
That's where you could add.
yes.
So there would be a change. There would be a change.
We would
to what's
be
there.
doing that where in our comments at the end? Just,
Typically.
yeah, like the
Yeah,
airport
typically.
zoning, when I brought,
Yeah,
okay.
yeah,
Get the
typically.
consensus and then.
We've had emergency matters in the past. Sometimes we're made aware of a grant application deadline that is pending, and we're made aware of it at the last minute. And at the beginning of the meeting, the chair in his comments asks if we can add this item to the agenda. That happens sometimes at the beginning of the meeting.
Right.
Right, and that's put on by the administrator or the county attorney.
If you look at our rules, what our rules say is paragraph 2, after we've done the pledge and the moment of silence, additions, deletions, and modifications to the agenda.
Right.
Right.
I mean, that seems to me, that's where you'd raise your hand and say, I have an addition to the agenda.
If you wanted to add it to that meeting's
If you wanted to add it to that meeting, that's when you would do that.
And that's typically already been vetted by the administrator. It's in the red folder or whatever.
Doesn't have to be.
No,
Doesn't have
there's
to
a
be.
difference.
It doesn't have to be. You could say, at the meeting starts, And I said, are there any additions, deletions? And you raise your hand and say, I have an addition, I would like to add something. And then we would have to vote on it.
Well, that would not be in the sunshine, and that would be frowned upon in my.
No, it is. You're doing it at the committee meeting. We're sitting
But you
here.
don't have, if you're adding something to the agenda at the meeting, there's no backup that's been made public
Well,
before then.
You're probably not going to get approved then. If you're,
Okay.
I mean, I'm just saying, you have that authority. As a commissioner, you have that authority. to
Just
do
for our,
But you're right. You'd be doing it, everybody going, what's that? You know?
Okay.
It currently, and just back to Sean, right now it says that any commissioner or the chairman?
Correct.
So why would you differentiate between those two people?
Well, we're Xing them both out.
Yeah, or we leave any commissioner and take out the chairman, or vice versa. So the question really comes down to, well, I would say that, well, I don't know, I'm not sure. Why are we differentiating in the language between, in this case, just this particular case, any commissioner or the chairman can add an item? It seems to me it's a duplication. There's no difference. If you're a commissioner, one of you is going to be a chairman.
You're right.
That's the old language.
Yeah.
We're striking through that, so it's not.
Yeah, it's gone.
It's gone.
Any commissioner.
It's gone. No, it's not. It's gone.
So now we can't add things.
Without consensus of the board, without.
This is the exact language. The administrator or the county attorney may place an item on the agenda, which means they prepare the agenda. Okay?
Right.
Any commissioner may seek consensus of the commission to add an item to a commission agenda.
That's what it says right now.
That's the proposed new
But you have to do that in the meeting.
Well, maybe you
For the
add
next
3 words
meeting.
at the current meeting.
Right. You can't just do it, call everybody up on the phone and say, do you agree?
Well, no, 'cause
That would be against the law.
No, that's correct. That's correct. I agree.
Okay.
Okay?
There's mud.
Next item.
Thank you. I know it's kind of gets into the weeds, but it is important for what we do. So
Yeah.
thank you for that discussion.
Okay, good. Heidi, you and I will,
actually that-
you and I will talk.
That leads another question on that item. Say a commissioner wants to put something on an agenda at the meeting, at the day of the meeting. Should it be a simple majority or a supermajority?
I think it simple, I mean,
I
there's
think
no
just a
statute
majority.
that says it has to be a
Majority.
supermajority unless we wanted to restrict ourselves, but.
Well, it eliminates rash judgments sometimes if it requires.
3 to 2? 3
No,
to 2?
4 to 1 would.
I know, but you're saying 3 to 2, we can't handle it?
And just saying, throwing it out there. I mean, that's what this is for, right?
Right, that's
Okay.
right.
So if the consensus is 3 to 2, the simple majority, then we'll go with it.
I think it is. I think that's all you need. But it's going to be very difficult to do, as you pointed out.
Right.
There's no background, or
Right.
we haven't been. So
We
that,
can't discuss it prior to.
yeah, prior
among
to the
ourselves
meeting,
prior.
so,
Yeah.
so that would initiate a discussion and then a motion, and then whether or not it passes.
We can ask
Yes,
for it to
ma'am.
be put on a future meeting, the next, right.
Yes.
That would be,
That might get a 3 to 2.
that might get a 3 to 2. Yeah, I think that would be very difficult to do.
Majority for that night of the agenda or majority for a future agenda.
No, just a simple
right.
majority works. Okay. What's the next point? Andy, you had a couple more, didn't you?
Sure. I'll call out the page number. I'm on page 8 of 37. So the first one, it says preparation of agenda. We're still on that for some reason. County administrator shall prepare the agenda according to policies developed by the commission. So what are those policies?
The policy is we can't add anything. We just discussed that.
No, I would think that would relate back to, so like a land use matter, there's policies that dictate when those items get to
If property's five
for
acres or
decision.
more, has to come to us.
Agenda item
Yeah.
has to meet a certain
financial
format or-
expenditure, a budget a budget change. There, we have policies governing all of
Now,
those
the-
items.
Yeah,
the
what comes,
strategic
what has
plan
to come to us?
reference the strategic plan now. So that's the policies that so it has to be budget, okay, that makes sense.
That's the way I interpret it.
Okay.
Yep, I agree.
Presentation, still on the same page, presentations on time certain items shall be a maximum of 15 minutes in length. So presentations at the beginning of the agenda sometimes run long. And I can't tell you if 15 minutes is long or too long, but at times they run excruciatingly long.
Well, we've been holding to 15. We've done that,
Okay,
but that's a long time. It is.
okay.
But we've held people to that
But we're okay with 15 minutes being the max for presentations?
on business items and 8
No,
and
that's
9.
just presentations, like when they do them before, at the top of the agenda. When they're making a
I'm sorry,
presentation.
no, we don't have a time limit on that.
I mean, if you could add language unless agreed to by the commission for a lengthier presentation or something to that. Just put an out clause in there if that's what you're getting at.
I know we averaged a little, each of the proclamations this morning were about 6 minutes long, if you average them out. So just think about a presentation and how long that could push the meeting out. But I just am bringing it up for discussion. I don't know if anybody has any.
Well, I forgot what it said.
It says 15 minutes.
Yeah, that's
for-
fine. 15 minutes is fine.
Everybody okay? Okay. I'm seeing nods. Next page, page 9. Under 3, announcements by the chair. And I know that's been added for last-minute items, but there's been abuse of that. And I wonder if we can't put an example of what announcements by the chair is, so that it is not abused or has the tendency not to be abused. So what do we think announcements by the chair means?
Typically, it's to let the public know of maybe upcoming meetings, workshops, things coming up.
Openings.
That may be ribbon cuttings, it may be things like that.
So it's not open season for the chair just to go on about anything.
That's not what it's intended to
Okay.
be.
Right. I would just say you're right, Andy, because if you go to item 10D, like, that's called commission reports, comments, actions.
Right.
You don't want that first announcements by the chair to drift into.
Okay,
Is
as
that
long as
right?
we got that, okay.
Andy, Ms. Petito gives me the announcements. I mean,
Okay.
I've got a script.
I know, but that doesn't mean
I can't go off script.
I'm chair and I'm going to go
That has
off
happened.
script. I just want to make sure that we can, raise a point then to the
Yeah.
chair and say you're out of order or
Right,
something.
right.
Okay. Sean, did we do anything, or were we going to do more into commissioner ethics did you look at those and,
Yes, I did add, I think, a sentence. Let me see if I can find it. And it was a aspirational sentence, page 16. And it's yellow highlighted.
code of conduct?
Each commissioner is subject to the Code of Ethics for Public Officers' Employees, Part 3 of Chapter 112, Florida statutes. And that's just a fact. Each commissioner will attend annual ethics training as required by Section 112. So that's just a requirement of statute. And then each commissioner shall strive to faithfully comply with the Code of Ethics adopted by the Florida Association of Counties. I just added that based on the discussion last meeting. We're certainly open to any other ideas. It's an aspirational, it shall strive. It's not exactly
I'm
something.
okay with that for right
Yeah,
now.
I think that's fine.
No, it makes
Yeah.
sense.
All right, I'll go through, I'm trying to go through these really quick. There's various places where it says that the rules of procedure, I'm on 16, number 4.6. Rules of procedure may be amended or temporarily suspended at any commission meeting with an affirmative vote of a majority of the commission. Is that okay with everybody?
I tried to come up with an instance where we would do that.
Well, we just talked about one. Suppose we decided that it was an important presentation or speaker and we wanted to allot more than 15 minutes. Well, our rules of procedure say 15 minutes.
Okay.
But we
Well,
would,
that's a good example.
I have another example. Remember
that's
during
good.
COVID, when we had the group come in, we had to stop the meeting, and then we changed procedures to let one guy come back in and talk. So we did change it on that particular day.
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
All right, that's good. I like the format is better. So thank you. And the only other one regarding the boards is I would like to float the idea of an educational requirement for the Planning and Development Board. Having sat through and having talked to our the new planning board members when they come on, is they're thrown immediately into a planning board meeting without a lot of training, especially if they don't have a background in land use issues. And FAC and the Institute for County Government has the new growth management and land use class, and I would like to see that as a basis to get that within the first month of being on a planning board, that they complete that course. And it's really just sitting through, I think it's about 6 hours of training.
Do they have to go somewhere to get it, or they can do it online?
They can do it online.
I think we can suggest that. I
Yeah,
don't know
I
that we
like the
can
word
require that.
suggest.
Yeah, I don't think we can require that.
Why can't you?
I don't know. I think someone can say, I don't want to do that. And you can't unseat him. He's already been approved.
We have a hard time getting people to come to some of our boards.
you know what?
No, we've approved him,
You know,
him or
Andy-
her, and they say, no, I don't want to do that.
Well, Mr. Chair, you know, I mean, Andy makes a good point. Plus also, they're subject to the sunshine, so they at least should be trained on.
They do that.
They do do
They
that?
do that, yeah.
Okay.
Matter of fact, Sean does a lot of that. He goes to and gives them a brief on the sunshine law.
I think it takes part of, too, our staff time, because Sean, Adam dedicate time to train the new board members, and this would take that responsibility off of them as well, at least for some of the segments that they teach. I think you probably would still do the sunshine one in person with them, but
And you're just talking about the planning.
has to.
The planning.
planning, just the planning.
Planning.
Yeah,
board.
yeah, because, no, it won't work with, and there isn't that kind of training probably for a lot of the other boards anyway.
It seems like it's an important, you know,
Planning.
a lot of decisions rest just at the planning board, and
I
they
agree
stop
with you.
there. They don't come to us.
No, I agree with you. I think it's a problem. Ms. Pam?
No, I was going to concur with him. I also had another thing, and this is maybe not the discussion for it, but while we're talking about that particular board, you know, so a resident brought it to me that we have quite a few people on that board that are not homeowners in the community. And I don't know if you guys feel that that would be an important thing to sit on our planning and zoning board, that you actually be a homeowner. I think currently, what is it, just registered voter is all that we require. But we've got, I know of two that were brought to me that are not homeowners in our community at all. And so I don't know if that, you know, weighs on you at all, or, you know, but to have someone who's making these large, impactful decisions, you know, up there. Of course, we ultimately make them, but to them not even being a homeowner in the community is interesting to me.
I think that would be considered to be discriminatory, though, if we did something like that, because, I mean,
Well, so
I mean,
it's not
it's,
registering to vote, maybe, but we
Well,
require that.
I mean, if you, I mean, folks that live in rental properties have an opinion and have rights too, as a, you know, as a citizen of the county.
I think it's really hard to put requirements on volunteer service.
Well,
You know, like this, and, you know, as you know, it's hard to fill those seats.
Well, the
I mean, it is
state's,
very
talk about
difficult.
hard, the state's getting ready to require that they file financial, the same documents we file on the volunteer boards.
But they have to know what they're getting into. I mean, and that course is really just a what to expect. I mean, and the basics that you have to know. We're held liable if they're not.
I'm not fighting you on the issue. I
Okay.
think we should have it. I just don't think you can make it mandatory.
Well, unless they show, I don't even know, unless they're certified in a certified planner or some certified, I guess the exclusion would be in if they could demonstrate experience in planning, if they were an engineer, or planner, I mean, would be the only other, I think that may, eliminate the need to do it because
Well,
they've shown.
we
proof.
had a member who was a homeowner and had a master's degree in planning, and somebody on this board fired him.
Only because I said just while the court cases.
I think I just, having discussions, if it's like a basis anyway, because I know from talking to our most recent planning board member, it's a lot to be thrown right out there.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I agree.
And like you said, they're volunteering, but they want to make sure that they have the right information to act appropriately.
No, I'm not disagreeing.
Okay.
At all.
Yeah,
think we
I
ought to
would
write
be,
that in.
I would be in favor of writing some sort of rules or procedures or qualifications for that particular
Board.
board.
And exclusions if can show experience as a planner or engineer or something, I would think would be appropriate. That I don't know that they could.
Well, it's part of the application process is, why are you qualified for
Yeah.
the job? You have to spell that out.
Okay.
All right. Okay, good.
Thank you.
I would just say, based on the discussion today, plus, I mean, I read through all, all the suggested changes. Unless there's any major opposition, I would just recommend we could bring this forward to get adopted.
Bring it to the board.
On a future agenda.
On a future agenda, right.
I concur.
I concur.
All right, we got that one. Now we'll open once again to public comment. Anybody in the public wish to comment on this procedure, the rules of procedure discussion, please come forward, state your name, and make your comments to the chair. No? Just on this, just on rules of procedure.
David Eckert, Calais del Sur. I've been attempted to volunteer with the county for years, and I think there's a big donut hole that you may be missing. This is a very complex subject. But all of the information and now the schedule that you get the information on being 20 days or so that we were just talking about is putting you in a disadvantage, I think, to stay abreast of the staff work. And it is difficult to get qualified volunteers to be involved in some of these subjects, but I think that in many subjects, you would be much better off having other sources of information than just the staff. Not as a confrontational point of view or anything, but the fact that, just look at the schedule that we talked about relative to getting this vote on the 17th. You can't meet the vote for the 17th relative to the Hammock Dunes request. It had to be delayed. When you combine getting all of the information in month-old packages or 2 or 3 weeks old packages, and it's not a criticism, it's complex work that you're doing. I do think that you need to have ability to speed up things, emphasize something and you can't talk to one another, so you need a way to communicate to the staff. And if they disagree on putting a subject on the agenda or doing work on the agenda, you're really stymied in a number of areas on complex topics, hard bottom. I only know the ones that I volunteered on, but on many of these topics. So I know it's hard to write all these rules, but I do want you to think more about what you're doing because we don't want the BOCC to be constrained. Greg, you're our district representative. If we come to you with an issue and you're stymied from a staff standpoint to take a charge of that and to find some way to get it on the agenda, there's got to be a breakthrough way. Now, at the end of every meeting, maybe you propose things that you want to add, but I guess you can do that one-on-one with the staff also. And I expect that 99% of the time it's cooperative. But, on difficult subjects, maybe things get delayed till they're pocket vetoed, so.
Thank you. Next speaker. Seeing no one come forward, I'll close the public comment, and I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
Mr. Chair, can I just say one?
Yes.
Just to not push back for Mr. Ecker, but maybe just give a little bit more behind the scenes understanding. It's incumbent upon all of us to work with staff, and we do. So there's many conversations and briefings that we have, and staff sometimes does individual briefings with us, or sometimes it might be just us, and we take it at our speed, what we and related back to our responsibilities and things that we're working on. So there is a lot of give and take and a lot of discussion about business that goes on without violating the sunshine by working with staff or meeting with folks like yourselves that we have done or I've done. So it's really just incumbent on us to do that work. And if you don't, then you shouldn't vote for us. And I'm not saying that, I'm not trying to be negative. I'm just trying to shed light on a little bit more of the process behind the scenes too. So, and lastly, I'll say is, it hasn't always been the case, but it has been for a long time now. As long as except for the first year I was serving, but we have complete access to staff. We're not stymied by administration. If I want to call Adam up and talk to him, I do. And that was not always the case in this county. There was a bottleneck, and there were commissioners were stymied, but that's not the case. And so it's incumbent upon us to hire the right administrator and attorney to make sure that happens. So
It's a good point.
Oh, no, I thought we were closing out for public comment. Were you here for public comment, or?
Oh,
but
no.
Okay.
So, nothing else? Then I'll entertain a motion.
So moved.
We're adjourned. Thank you. Thank everybody for coming that stayed around.
All right.
What? I'm sorry.
I should have been farther than your list.